Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Two Stewards Show. I'm Mark.
We're live, right?
We're live, Brent.
All right.
So knock it off.
Oh, sorry.
I'm Mark. I'm here with Brent.
Hello, everybody.
And what are we doing today, Brent? We're talking about I don't know, things in the news.
Yeah, you had an important
local
story
things.
right off the top with your bird.
Oh. Really? We're gonna. Hopefully, my children don't listen to this. I have to relive this trauma. We inherited a bird. I was a little late to the studio this morning. We inherited a bird from
why
a
are
brother
you
who
late
moved out
today,
of country, and it's a parrotlet, so a small parrot. And we've been slowly coaxing it and getting to know it, and it'll come out of the cage a little bit, right? And but my dog, she's a Schnauzer cross and does not she hunts, right? She'll catch birds in the backyard and rodents and whatever. But anyways, my daughter's talking to the bird. It's out of the cage, just on the edge of the cage. Doesn't the dog come in right as the bird falls out of the cage? Dog grabs the bird, and I think it broke its neck. And anyways, the kids are screaming. I get the bird out of the dog's mouth and hold on to it for a few minutes, but it passed. So it was quite the traumatic experience in our household. And you have made the very poor taste joke saying that it was the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah. So something is going downhill. I don't know what it is.
Well, I think we're about to find out what that is, Brent. Okay, you want to start with CPI numbers?
Yeah.
And speaking of made up things, here we can just start with the jobs revision in the U.S. They revised the job numbers for 2023 down by 1.2 million.
Okay.
So like all the job gains last year, they were talking about the economy's great, employment's great. Like it's normal for them to do some revisions because you have different sets of data that come out and some take a little bit more time.
Yeah, like
but not to the tune of one. And usually it's like in the next couple months.
How many people actually work in the States?
It's interesting if you look at
1.3 million
documented versus un. But anyways, huge revision in the numbers, and so it's curious to see.
Okay, wait. Let's back up a little bit because.
All right.
So, when did they release the job numbers that they just revised?
Well, they do it monthly, right? Monthly and quarterly. They'll put out numbers and be like, "Hey, look how great our economy is. We've got this many more jobs."
Yeah.
And so, like I said, it's
sometimes routine nature for them to put any number out there and then just make the news and then come back later and revise it to the accurate number.
Some people have been saying, like, these don't look right because they don't mesh with what we're seeing anecdotally and with some other numbers.
Corporations looking at.
Yeah, well, just like people who are pundits, people are commenting on the numbers, but like, whatever, here's the numbers, there you go.
Yeah. We don't listen to pundits anymore, are they?
I like to think
like
we are a couple of
CHML
pundits.
went out of business.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I was just saying to you off air, like, we did that, right?
Yeah. So for people who don't know, this is a radio station in Hamilton where we are. And it's 97 years old.
Yeah.
So it's one of the first, I think, 100 stations in Canada.
Yeah.
And it's been running ever since, and then they just stopped it last week or whatever.
Yeah. They got noon. They just no notice, just like, hey, everybody, we're done.
Yeah.
Boom.
And everyone was devastated. Like, I went to the flower store, and they're like, "Can you believe it?" Like,
did you really?
No.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe you're at the flower store. Well, it is interesting. It is emblematic, right? Like, would you rather listen to talk radio and some guys blathering? I mean, it's kind of what we do, but some guys going on about different things in sports and politics, or would you rather listen to a bunch of curated podcasts about things that you really want to know about, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, the podcast every time.
Yeah.
But, and the government is not doing any favors by subsidizing all these news corporations, right? All the journalists and stuff. Like, it's nonsense.
It's noise.
For one. Well, it's noise. It influences how they report, undeniably. And and it's just hastening. They're not hastening. It's lengthening their demise.
But if this radio station that's gone down, they make their money by ads, right? And if people if companies are not paying to advertise because they're not seeing any benefit to it,
Yep.
that must mean something pretty big, right?
Yeah, I mean, typically if you're advertising, you're going to track it, right? If you're spending money on a new campaign, then you look at, what's the difference in leads that are coming in. And presumably, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't advertise anything that we do on, that I do on
the
the
radio.
radio.
Yeah.
I don't think. Like, I don't know. And like, do you listen?
No.
Do you listen to the radio ever?
You know what? I used to commute to Toronto, and I listen to talk radio every now and then, and just because I had so much time in the car, and I was like, well, I've listened to that podcast so long, I cannot handle it anymore. I'm going to try the radio. And then 30 minutes listening to the radio, and you're like, this is crazy. And well, actually, it was probably like 10 years ago, and you could tell like 10 years ago to like now, the difference in the programming and the mindset in people, and it's wokest.
Well, my brother-in-law listened to podcasts all the time. Like, he worked with me for a while, and they were going back, I don't know, 5 years maybe. And it's like, what is the attraction, right? But then it's like, you listen. If you're at work and you're doing stuff and you want something to listen to, like, listen to. It's like, oh, there's something to these podcasts, right? It's actually good information and stuff I want to learn about or hear about. And anyways, I don't know how we got.
Yeah, I went back 5 years. I shaved my beard off, and then
and I grew mine.
Anyways, we were talking about U.S. job numbers a little bit.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, just about the government like making everything up. So subsidizing journalism. I mean, that's here in Canada, which is laughable. But the U.S. Making up these like crazy, right? Because the Fed has been talking. The Federal Reserve Bank in the States is talking about, like, it's almost a foregone conclusion now. They're going to start cutting rates next month, right? And there's some talk about that. So I don't know with this revision in job numbers what that means, right? Because if unemployment's high, will they then be forced to cut rates? Like, is this all part of the game?
I always get messed up when we talk about the Phillips curve. Like, if unemployment is high, then inflation should go.
Well, that would mean inflation is low.
Yeah, okay.
Because there's not a lot of activity happening.
So
there's
inflation
not a lot of
is
people
cooling
working.
down? Because in Canada it is. Or they say it is.
They say it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably is, right?
We should talk about that next. But U.S. job numbers, so they would report a number, and then they would make a revision to that. Yeah, sorry, we got some flies in the office, but they would make a revision to that number, and in this case, the revision was $1.2 million people
over the last year. And normally it would be like, the last jobs report, we got to revise it by 20,000 because like the farm numbers came in and this happened or whatever, right? But not like.
Not that significant of a
this
twist.
is ridiculous. And just side note, the not to get too political, but I saw an interview at the Democratic National Convention. This is the U.S. Secretary of Commerce.
Yeah.
So, commerce, that's like people working and businesses and stuff, right? So you should know about this stuff. The reporter interviewing her said, like, and so, there's been this, downward, apparently employment's not as good as we thought because we've seen this revision of like 1.2 million. And she's like, I don't believe anything that Trump says, he's blah, 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 blah. And she's like, actually, this came from
Kamala.
Your own government, right? The Bureau of Labor Statistics or whatever. And she's like, I'm not familiar with that.
It's like,
and you're just like, what?
You're in charge of that, aren't you?
This is literally your job.
That's called Trump hate, right?
Trump derangement syndrome.
Well, when did they go to the moon? In the 60s?
They never went to the moon. What are you talking about?
Okay, we'll have to have that podcast eventually. But if you can think about, so I'm reading this kid's book to my kids, and it's about the time when they went to the moon and all the math calculations involved.
I'm glad you clarified to your kids.
Yeah. So
not just for your own pleasure.
The book didn't talk about whether or not they did, or just talk about the math calculations that were necessary. So I'm just thinking like 50, 60 years ago, what is this, 70 years ago?
Yeah.
They're doing all of this stuff, and like they send someone to the moon, and now we can't even count how many people are working.
Yeah.
Accurately.
Exactly. Well, so
you have
it's like there's one of two things. Yeah. Did we go to the moon? Was it all just made up? Or have we just gotten so bad and so much worse at everything that we really suck right now.
Yeah.
I think it's the latter.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
anyways. Okay, back to Canada, though.
Yeah.
You said CPI is coming down, apparently,
Yeah.
which is good. As our climate minister says, CPI and the environment go hand in hand, and we're
You're
winning.
gonna have to explain that.
I
How they
can't.
go hand in hand.
I can't. Okay, it's just what he said.
But yeah, inflation continues to cool. So we had the last reading. So in July, headline CPI was 2.5%. So that's the lowest since March 2021. So it's hit a 40-month low.
Okay.
And remember, I guess we've said this before, that when we talk about inflation and inflation going down, that doesn't mean that prices are going down. It just means they're going up less fast, right?
Yeah.
So we're still, according to the CPI metrics, 2.5% up in prices, but it's come down, right? And why do we want to track that? I guess because we want to know where rates are going to go and how's the economy doing.
And the government's target is usually between 2 and 3%.
Yeah. So if we're smack dab in the middle of that, and the other one, I guess, headline CPI is a bit different than core inflation, right? So they kind of strip some stuff out and they say, okay, that actually dropped. Core inflation dropped from 2.6 down to 2.4 in July.
Okay.
So that's come down, and I guess it's not super surprising if a huge percentage of that is the mortgage interest cost, right?
Which has now a heavier weighting, right?
Yeah. So we talked about this before, but yeah, that they make up this inflation metric based on a whole basket of goods, and then they have the power to reweight that basket of goods, right?
And so because mortgage costs are high, right? They're very high.
Yeah. So if they gave that a bigger weighting, the mortgage interest component of the CPI, and then, you wait a month or two, which is what they did, and they lower the rate, well, now all of a sudden the core inflation drops, and everything looks a lot better, right? But yeah, you mentioned that their target is 2 to 3%, and we're well within that, right? And we're continuing this downtrend.
Yeah.
And also the Bank of Canada doesn't really care so much about basically half of it. Like the 2.4% is core inflation. Of that 2.4%, 1.2% of it. So not 1.2% of 2.4, but like half
50% of it.
Half of the inflation metric is mortgage interest cost.
Is it that much?
Yeah.
Half of it?
Yeah.
Wow.
If you do the math, 1.2% is mortgage interest cost. The rest is everything else, right? So everything else that you spend money on or whatever that they're weighting compared to the mortgage interest, that's that number, the 2.4%. So basically the Bank of Canada has direct control on half of the core inflation metric, right?
For core
so they
inflation.
can control the interest rate, and they can also control half of the core inflation metric, essentially directly, right? So if they lower rates, the core inflation will come down, and they'll look like a hero. And so essentially they can kind of ignore that portion of the core inflation metric, right? And then everything else is kind of it's a smaller percentage, right?
Oh boy. Yeah. So are you saying interest rates are going to stay the same, or are they going to go down?
Well, they have reason to lower them, right? Because if the economy slows down and then inflation is well within their target and trending down, I think it sets the stage for more decreases.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, the other half of the equation would be employment, right? What do employment or unemployment numbers look like?
Well, we can look at that.
Well, I mean, if you listen to the government, we've got, on one hand, right, they would say we absolutely need more workers in this country. We have to. We have labor shortages, which to me would tell you that inflation should be high because the economy's running hot, right? Because when the economy's running hot, then everybody who wants to be employed is employed and companies can't find people. Is that true? I know. So I'm hearing conflicting, this is just anecdotal, but I'm hearing conflicting things, right? If you talk to trades, they're like, we can't find skilled people, right? But on the other hand, if you look at...
Has that ever changed? Or
I think it's getting worse, right? Because if you look at the makeup of trades, it's mainly like guys like me and older. who are,
I've done
skilled
it for like
blue
50,
collar.
60 years.
Yeah, 150 years. And
super skilled.
they're getting to retirement.
Arthritis. Yeah.
Yes, they have arthritis, so they're slowing down, but they're also getting to retirement age, and there's just nobody to replace them.
Yeah.
So there's one thing. But then if you look at things like, we talked about this, right? Youth unemployment is up in a huge way. And just even anecdotally, people trying to find
trust the
jobs.
Unemployment data, because it's like, is it the people who are alive that are of a working age who are not working, or is it the people who
It's people who
are
want
looking
to work
for jobs but
people
can't
who are
find-
looking but
But
can't
that's
find
just
them.
so misleading, because like, how many people don't actually want to work?
It is, but like any sort of marker,
Yeah.
as long as it's constant for a number of years, it's useful to look at trends. So whether or not the actual makeup of it is nonsense, like, okay, but at least you have some kind of indication of people looking for
Right.
jobs.
Yeah.
It may not be 100% accurate, but you can look at the trend. And right, we talked about kids looking for summer employment this year. Like, so many just like couldn't find it. Why
Yeah.
is that, right? Well, there's numbers to back that up now. And
And where are we going to point the finger this time?
at the government, like we always do. But okay, if we look at okay, let me.
Well, it's through immigration, right?
Yeah, it's all. It's all temporary foreign worker program, and it's all.
Oh, you got a
basically
graph on
immigrants.
the
I got a
screen.
graph here.
All
I'm
of our
gonna share
listeners have to go over to the YouTube channel
and watch.
and watch.
Okay, so the graph is Canada Temporary Foreign Worker Program work permit holders by selected intended occupation and year. So this is basically people who are in on the foreign worker program. So, I mean, in years past, when you're looking at the temporary foreign worker program, a lot of that was like people working on farms
Yeah.
and stuff, right? Like a lot of agriculture. So especially Southern Ontario, right? We had a lot of farms.
Yeah. Vineyards.
Vineyards.
Orchards.
Yeah, orchards, even
Yeah.
like vegetables and whatever
Yeah.
else, right?
Nurseries.
Yeah, like it's hard work, doesn't pay that well, and a
And
lot
it's
of people
seasonal,
it's
right?
seasonal, so it's harder to entice people into that because you're going to work for 6 months and then not.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of farmers who are like, oh, I can't find people, and like justifiably so, but they can find tons of Jamaicans, for example, would come down.
And they would come down just for the summer and then go.
They work like long hours. Some of them will have housing right on site at the farm.
Yeah.
They work long hours. They're happy because they make good money. They can send money back home. Then they go back home and chill for the rest of the year. And and that's cool. So that used to be.
Yeah,
I'm generalizing, but it used to be sort of the temporary foreign worker program.
My grandma is a big listener to this show, and she has that because she lives in the middle of an orchard. And I guess some of the Jamaicans there have been there for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
Come every summer. They have families. They go back home to their families. They come here for the summer for 20 years. Like, you imagine? I don't know. But that's just their lifestyle, right?
Yeah,
but that's the old paradigm, I guess, of temporary foreign
That's
workers.
what we kind of think of, right? And when you look at the chart, I'll pull it back
what
up
does
here.
the chart say?
Right. So this is just going back to 2015. So you would see the work permit holders, right, under 5,000. Sorry, let me put my glasses on here, right? And you got like, what are the things, right? Light duty cleaners, food service supervisors, cooks, food counter attendants. So this doesn't include, because I'm looking at these numbers are low, but this must exclude the agricultural sector, right? Because those numbers would be much, much larger than this. But if you look at it, less than 5,000 temporary foreign work permit holders in 2015. So to where we're now up to over 25,000. And it's like a big increase, right? It sat around average 5,000 to about 2021. 2022 was about
2022, it
14,000.
probably doubled from 2021, and 2023 doubled from 2022.
Yeah. So whether or not all the figures are right or whatever, again, this is a trend, right? And this is crazy. And so cooks, 10,000 cooks. Like, we can't find cooks in Canada. Like, we have to import people to be cooks or food service supervisors. So what is a food service supervisor? That's
That
someone
sounds pretty. Yeah.
that's a supervisor at Tim Hortons.
Oh,
Right? So you're telling me we can't find...
Are you telling me that Tim Hortons is food?
Yeah, it is. I would listen. I would say whatever you want to say. They got some decent food at Tim's, right?
A burger,
Better-
not without Canadian beef or Canadian farmers. And the Canadian farmers are actually, that's a lie, because the Canadian farmers aren't even Canadian, right? They're foreign workers.
Foreign work. Yeah. Well, the farmers are, as long as it's not that beyond.
Temporary foreign
Beyond
workers
meat.
raised this beef, and temporary foreign workers made it, and temporary foreign workers served it to you.
I don't know about the beef.
Okay.
We'll have to look into that. Anyways, food counter attendants, kitchen helpers, and related support occupations, another 5,700, and then light duty cleaners, 2,500. So, anyways, the point is,
Yeah, why are we talking
like
about this?
a huge number. Well, a huge increase just in the temporary foreign worker program, which is one thing, right? And that's like has been increasingly a path to citizenship, right? We've talked about the student way of trying to get in to get citizenship, the temporary foreign worker as well. That's separate, right? If you you come in under one program or another, not several. So this is just sort of one.
So temporary is kind of a misnomer, like it's pre-permanent instead of temporary.
Well, as we are coming to see.
Yeah.
Right. It used to be like, yeah, if we need people for a little while, let's bring some in, and like economically that makes sense. Humanitarian side, maybe you could disagree, but
Slavery.
economically, well, so this is like we're enabling modern day slavery in some areas in Canada, and that's like
And not just in agricultural spheres.
no,
but
that's
in
you're
all
talking about
kinds
these
of-
guys who've been coming over for 20 years and working. Like that's not slavery.
Yeah.
They're not making $40 an hour, but they're making decent money, and they're like it's a voluntary reciprocal arrangement that works.
Yeah.
But now we're talking about so okay, let's look at some other numbers here, and then we can talk about the program and then fraud in the program
Okay.
and how that's enabling some modern day slavery. Which, like, we're talking about Canada here, by the way. We're not talking about
The
a
land
third
of
world
the free
country.
and
We're
the
not talking about
home
the
of
Congo.
brave, or
Well, where they're mining like cobalt for pennies a day, and like children are working in these mines and dying in them because it's unsafe. We're talking about Canada, which is like shameful. And this is a direct result of pretend woke policies by our prime minister and
All right.
by this liberal
let's
government.
pull up the graph here.
Okay. You
Administrative
trying to
assistant
rein me in.
approvals.
Okay, we talked about specifically the administrative assistant position before, like, I don't know, a bunch of episodes back, right? And how this is being misused because so there's different classifications, right? So tier, TEER, I can't remember what it stands for. I'll look it up.
Yeah.
But you have tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So tier 3 is the lowest rung that you can get for express entry, right? So if you have someone who meets the qualifications for this group and administrative assistant is in that group, that means they qualify for express entry, which means
Wait, so
it's like a
anybody on the tier
necessary-
scale?
well,
would
tier
qualify-
4
yeah.
is like that's high school or less, jobs that require high school or less.
Yeah,
And
tier
the
5.
government has said like that's not necessary, right? That's like we don't need to bring people in. But if there's a shortage in any tier 1, 2, 3, we should, like, if you can't find someone in Canada, then let's bring somebody in from outside Canada. So again, this is the lowest setting, administrative assistants. And again, if you're watching, you'll see this, but we start 2016 administrative assistant approvals within the temporary foreign worker program. So the numbers that we looked at before, where's that chart? Was just sort of in food service and stuff, right? I don't think this is not the entire number. This is just people
to
working
jump
at
in
Tim
for a
Hortons.
sec, just to clarify, tier is training, education, experience, responsibilities.
Yeah.
So the training, education, experience, and responsibilities required to work in an occupation.
Yeah. So like tier 1 would be like doctors and stuff, right? Provided they can get
Yeah.
approval.
Yeah.
Because they need a lot of training, experience,
You
a
have
lot of
university
education,
degree.
and there's a
Yeah.
high degree of responsibility. So once you get down to administrative assistant, I mean, I don't think that needs to, you should get express entry. But anyways, So this is just administrative assistants within the temporary foreign worker program. And so this is not huge numbers here, right? We're looking at thousands, but it's a trend. And it's a trend of fraud. And I'll get into that. But yeah, so maybe a couple hundred in 2016. You see that growing to under 1,000 in 2020, 21. All of a sudden, 2022, it bumps to over 2,000. 2023, it's 3,500. So, like, why is this? And anecdotally,
So we
people
don't have
are
any
saying,
data on here for 2024 yet,
no.
but we can make an assumption
You can make an assumption it's going to be way up.
on the fraud trend.
Yeah, so it's an increase of 3,000% since 2016. Because employers have realized, we can use this administrative assistant classification
To get cheap labor.
And
the
And
admin
not
assistant
skilled.
people realize it's an opportunity to get into Canada
yeah,
and to get employment,
that's the second. Yeah, and to get
express entry.
citizenship,
Okay.
right?
So these are tier 5,
No, this is 3.
tier 3.
So 1, 2, 3 is all express entry, and that's why they're using the admin assistant position to justify. So we talked about it last time, right? It could be like dispatcher, and a lot of these apparently are for trucking companies and food service, but it could be like you need a dispatcher, but dispatcher is like tier 4, maybe 5.
Right.
So we're going to reclassify this job as an admin assistant.
Okay.
And if you look through all the
this
jobs,
is what we have to explain to people, because I didn't understand it the first time you talked about it. But so
Ah.
tier 0, 1, 2, 3 is express entry.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain, like you have to have a college diploma. You have to have a certain amount of qualifications. Tier 4 and 5,
Well,
high school diploma or less.
So once you're into 3, it's less about the qualifications and more about the responsibilities,
right.
because that was the other part of the description, right? So you don't have to have a college diploma for tier 3 necessarily, but the responsibilities of the job have to be such that it's a critical part of the workings of a company.
Yeah.
So as an admin, I guess an admin
And
assistant.
because
could be.
of those people are so valuable to our economy and they bring in skills and help companies here thrive, we give them express entry.
Yes.
And then they probably have a streamlined path to citizenship.
Yes.
This is me assuming these things. Okay.
Yeah,
So then
once
tier
you-
4 and
once you've worked
5,
for a while-
we don't give those privileges to those kind of jobs, but
No.
we still want them to come in to do this work.
No.
So what we're saying is the administrative assistant role has been looked at,
Yeah. So
but it's really a tier 4, 5 kind of person, but they're making it sound like tier 3.
yes.
Okay.
So
I
anecdotally,
got
many of the
this now,
employers
Mark.
getting approved for admin workers are trucking companies and immigration consultants.
Okay.
So this is a whole huge
So I just
class
had
that's grown
an epiphany
in
on
itself. Oh,
live on the air on Two Stewards Show.
okay.
I
Here
just
we go.
I just understood this.
Oh, okay. I didn't explain it well enough last time.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a way to get citizenship, and so again, there's not numbers to support this, but there's widespread fraud. You ask anybody in the industry, anybody who knows a little bit about this, like what happens is people are making arrangements for either returning some of their pay to the companies or paying a huge bounty to the immigration consultant who arranges this, because these immigration consultants are a big part of this, right? They are recruiting in India, just like the colleges have been doing for a long time. Now you got people like, hey, this is a great, and like, it's mainly India. Let's be honest. There's India and China are the two biggest sources of immigration to Canada, right? There's a lot of Latinos and stuff, but if you look at the numbers, by and large, China, and I think China's falling and India's gaining. And that's just backed up with what you see.
Yeah.
If you live in a city, it's undeniable.
Yeah.
But so let's say, they're out there, they're in foreign country, and they'd be like, okay, you pay 10 grand and we're going to get you set on the path to citizenship. So like, yeah, if you're living in poor conditions and you're like a relatively bright or the brightest in the family's going to scrape together that money, pay this money, and then you're going to go to Canada and then hopefully have a better life and then bring the rest of your family with you.
So you get an administrative assistant job and you end up what? What are you actually doing for
Well,
work?
you could be a dispatcher at a trucking company. You could be working at an immigration place, helping them do whatever. You could be driving a truck, right? As long as your job meets one of the qualifications for the administrative assistant thing, And we talked about last time, nobody really spot checks. It's like food service supervisors, right? And it's so easy to fudge it. Like,
Yeah.
and there's no follow
Quick,
up.
the inspector's coming. You supervise for a minute.
But there's also no follow up
Yeah.
on like how, okay, you came in as an admin assistant. Are you still doing that job?
Yeah.
No, you came in, you worked there for 6 months, you got fired or you went somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Like, and this is how you keep these positions going. There's just no follow up, and there's no. So, anyways, what happens is you bring in vulnerable people, put them in vulnerable situations, and they get taken advantage of.
Yeah.
Because the immigration consultants, the companies that are bringing them in,
The more you talk, the more trust I gain in our immigration system.
Don't get me started.
I think it's one of two Canadians thinks that there's too much immigration or something.
Yeah.
That's
It's ridiculous. But it's because of what people are seeing out there, right? And again, it's affecting their pocketbooks. I've said it before. Like, this is when people really get.
But so Canada realized this. Didn't we talk about this? They realized this not too long ago, and they basically said, "Look, we got to stop immigration, or we got to dial it back. Like, we're going to dial it back because we don't want to have all these like
a lot of pressures on our system."
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to queue up a video here. Well, no, because there's public sentiment. You said the 1 in 2 people, right?
Yeah.
Because the government is seeing this public sentiment, they're responding to that. It's not because of
for them to say we want to slow immigration down.
And they've said that.
Yeah.
Like, they've made these announcements. We're changing these requirements, et cetera, et cetera. They haven't done that. And B, they're making new changes, which we'll get into. But here, I just want to play a clip to help everybody understand why they're doing this. And then this will be clear for everybody, clear as mud. Okay?
A lot of pressures on our system. Increasing the immigration levels, interestingly, will take some of the pressure off of the system because the stream on bringing in permanent residents has got room to bring in more, and it's when people come as refugees and try to flip or get refugee crisis status that it sort of a lot of pressures on our system.
Okay, so hopefully that was really clear, right? Bringing in more immigrants will take pressure off the immigration system. So if you've got
Repeat that again.
Bringing in immigrants. Bringing in more immigrants will take pressure off the immigration system.
Right.
So if you've got a leak,
you might have to say that again.
I can't. It's so dumb. I can't.
Okay.
Right? If you've got a leak in your basement,
Yeah.
well, you could plug the leak and stop that. Or what you could do is make the hole bigger.
Yeah.
Because that will take pressure off the water that's coming in, and
Yeah.
that will actually make things better.
Yeah.
This
Because
is the
the
best
water-
analog I can give you. Right? Yeah. Oh, you'll end up with a basement full of water, but at least the leak will be
working.
Yeah. You'll take the pressure off that leak.
Right.
Right? All that water
So it's all
that's
about
in
the
your
pressure.
backyard is going to be in your basement now.
You should be a foundation repair guy or like salesperson.
Trudeau should be.
Yeah.
And it's just the nonsensical stuff that we're seeing. So, okay, so that's there's one more thing I'm going to bring up.
It's our fearless leader.
Fearsome leader. Okay, so I'll throw this up on the screen quickly. We're not going to read the whole thing. But, so this is, and because it's in jargon that is kind of boring, and who's actually going to read this, right?
Okay,
Forward regulatory plan up till 2026. Regulations amending the immigration and refugee protection regulations, tier 4, and I'm already asleep.
Yeah.
Okay. You read through it. And what the meat of this is that they want to introduce a new permanent economic class for workers with experience in tier 4 and 5. So this is high school equivalent or less, and they want to make a new permanent economic class, which means once you have that economic class, now you can accept people from that class, like you can have a target.
Right.
For immigration for that class.
So if we have that class, we can say we need 1 million of these people by the year, whatever. Are you meeting that target?
it's expected to improve opportunities for workers in Tier 4 and 5 occupations to transition to permanent residence, allowing these workers to continue contributing to the Canadian economy and supporting Canadian businesses who have labor market needs in Tier 4 and 5 occupations. So what does this mean? That means if you're 15 years old, you're never going to get a job at Tim Hortons or McDonald's again.
Yeah.
Right? Because this is Tier 4 and 5. Like, supporting the businesses who have labor market needs in the, like, what are you talking about? We have people here
who can't get jobs.
There's if somebody's hiring at the dollar store, there's a lineup, right? All these low wage jobs, there's lots of people who want these jobs and can't get them.
Yeah.
And summertime as well, right? Like we just mentioned.
That's how you grow in your career, right? You start somewhere, you get some experience, and then as you get experience, you go to the next. Now you're a supervisor, now you're whatever, right? And you start
Exactly. So
if you don't let people get in the door, oh man.
And I mean, here, let's just throw one more up here. Asylum claims surge.
The third depressing thing you put on the screen.
Right, here's a chart of asylum claims starting 2013, 10.5K. It's been growing a little bit. We saw a surge 2017 to 19 up to 60,000. Dropped back in 2020. Well, we had COVID, so nobody came in. So 60,000 in 2022. In 2023, asylum claims are 138,000.
You're going to have to explain.
Well, so this is someone who comes to Canada and says, I need asylum because of X. So this is claims, right? This isn't people that are approved, but clearly it's an indication of something. And what is that, right? It's an indication that people around the world know that our immigration system is bogus.
And it's easy to get in.
And it's relatively easy to get in. And
but they don't know that once they get in, they're in a trap. And
well, yeah, it is. I don't know. I'm a little bit despondent, right, around this, because if you see what's happening,
you're in the bog of despond.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hear stories, right? Even in Hamilton, people in the Latino community, and there's a large amount of Latinos that are applying for asylum as well, for various reasons, refugee claimants. And where they will cram it, like they'll take a 2-bedroom apartment or a 1-bedroom and have like 4 or 5, 6 people in there. A 2-bedroom, 8 to 10 people in there. And like, you can't believe it, right? It'd be like 4 people in the bedroom, 2 in the living room, 2 in the kitchen.
Yeah. On the floor.
Yeah. Just like with a mattress, whatever. And that's where they live, right? And they're all working shift work. So half of them are gone half the time. And just people are being taken advantage of. And we're allowing this to happen because we're allowing such a huge stream of immigrants, which is why 1 in 2 Canadians are like, there's too many immigrants. And it's funny because a year ago, you couldn't say this.
Yeah.
You would be a racist, right?
Yeah.
Like immigrants aren't a race. There's different races, right? But now people are like, it's just to the point where it's ridiculous. And people are like, it's not good for Canada. And it's not good for the people coming in. Yeah, we're race to the bottom. It's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
And you hear so much fraud in this program, so many people being taken advantage of.
Well, one way it's not good for people is, like, we can jump to housing, right? Because we have to talk about real estate investing, and that's the where these two things meet, right? You have immigration, you have population growth. We can look at those trends, and we have.
Yep.
And we can talk about fraud in that system, but in reality, the government might say they're shutting down immigration. They need, to a certain extent, a certain amount of immigration, right, to keep economy growing at their targets.
Well, to increase GDP, is that what you're talking about?
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean nominal GDP.
Yeah.
Not real GDP, which we know is falling.
Yeah,
Anyways,
they don't really care about real numbers, right? If they did, they would probably do different things. They just talk about the nominal, which, for people who don't know what nominal is, in name only, right?
Yes.
Like, just whatever I called it. Yeah. Okay.
Or if food is really good, nom nom nom.
But if you go to a restaurant that serves food by
It's all temporary foreign workers.
temporary foreign worker. Anyways, so on the housing start side, we talked about the CMHC MLI Select program, right?
Yes.
And that was it's a government funded program or a government organization, CMHC, right? Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, that's backing these loans,
Yeah.
or offering insurance on these loans, and it's on rentals, right? Purpose-built rentals.
Yeah.
So if you look at the housing starts, that's a good indicator of, okay, how many housing units are we building? What types of housing are we building, right? And
Well, with the amount of immigrants we have coming in, we should be building like a bajillion houses, right?
yeah, and that's what,
Right?
yeah, that's what you should be. I would agree with you, right? I don't know how many a bajillion is, but no, they just sell a bajillion mattresses.
Yeah. If you want to start a business, sell mattresses.
But the housing starts numbers came out for July, and they're strong. Like, they look great, right?
Yep.
And
Evidence that things are working.
And right away, the government jumps on there. So there's a tweet from Chrystia Freeland, Canada needs more homes. That's why we're going to help build 4 million of more of them. And it's like, yeah, okay, 4 million in what time frame, and who's going to build them? And then she goes on to say kind of the data, right? Housing starts went up 16% in July. Like, that sounds great, right? Like, we've been coming along. The government said we're going to build 4 million homes. They said, here's some money to build it.
Yep.
We're going to help. We're here to help and invest in Canadians. And the data shows it went up, right? Mark, how could this lie?
I guess, you know what? I'm wrong. I apologize.
And then what do? I want to take credit for this because it went up. This is good news and a step towards putting home ownership back in reach for younger generations, right? There's the dialogue.
Yeah, I guess everything's good.
Trying to appeal to people who can't actually afford a house,
Yeah.
right? So we are changing this for people. We're investing in this. We're fixing the problem. 16% more housing starts. That means in a couple of years, guys, all you young people, just hold on. There will be houses for you to buy.
Okay. I'm glad.
So is that actually what's happening, right? And so there's a little bit of backstory there, right? Because in a couple months ago in March, May, I think it was, they changed the CMHC MLI Select program qualification grid, right? So that was basically the source of a lot of these housing starts in Ontario and BC, which are primary drivers of this, right? So people are big developers looking at this, like basically getting really, really cheap money from the government to build big buildings that are rentals. That's great, right? So let's do that.
Cheap money and low money up front.
Yeah.
Because they'll finance up to 95%?
95% loan to value.
Yeah.
But the requirements to get that money
Yep.
used to be, like up until this spring, used to be basically you build to the building code, you get the money, right?
Yeah, we did a whole episode on that.
So they changed that, right?
Yeah.
And on that episode, we talked about how the details of that change, a little bit more detail, but
Maybe we shouldn't have done that episode.
oh, maybe we should redo that episode. Huh? Yeah, maybe Chrystia Freeland should
Yeah,
listen
she
to that
listens.
episode.
It's like, hey, hold on a minute.
But what does that do? So now they changed the criteria, and
Okay, let me point out something real quick. Right, they changed the criteria because one was the energy efficiency green stuff, which basically, like you said, you built the code, you hit that, and you got enough points to qualify. The other two were accommodation
and accessibility
accessibility
and
geared to income.
affordability. Yeah,
So you would either have to make a certain amount of units accessible for like wheelchairs and stuff, which nobody really did because it's really expensive.
Yeah.
Or you could make it have more units that were affordable, like cheap housing.
Yeah.
And again, nobody really did that because it doesn't, like, it wouldn't make
it's
sense.
not financially viable.
Yeah.
It
It wouldn't. But what they did is they said, okay, enough of that. You have to have more either affordable housing or accessible housing in your things,
You can't
right?
just
Because
use
we have
energy.
a virtuous, woke government who is here for everybody and serving the downtrodden.
So basically, they told developers, look, you have to hit 100 points to get the money
Yep.
that you want to make your deals work. In order to get the 100 points, you can only get 50 points as with the energy efficiency criteria, which like that's good, right? We want people to develop energy efficient building, blah, blah, blah. But now you can only get 50 points. So you got to get the other points from somewhere else. And either you choose to lock in your rents below market value or whatever, like the median income percentage in your area. And basically your the developer would be doing this project to subsidize housing for other people. And that would eat into their profit and basically make it not worth it for them, right? So a lot of projects just didn't really pencil out, and some projects still do in some areas, and depending on what the median income is and all this stuff, right? And how big your project is and how diverse. But yeah, there's a lot of projects that just couldn't work, but they announced the changes in advance, right? And so there was a big flood of applications. Developers are going, look, I got this project that was coming up next year. I might as well just apply. Right? Let's get this in here. Let's apply because
if I wait till next year, it doesn't make sense and I can't build it.
Yeah. So we saw this wave a few months ago of all these applications coming in, right? So then that's the data we're talking about when housing starts are up 6. That's a huge amount, right? And so let's look at the breakdown of what happened in July. So housing starts went up overall 16%. The surge in starts was driven by the rental component, which jumped 58% year over year.
Yeah.
So the amount of rental construction was already up and trending up because of the MLI program.
Yeah.
And it's been like the highest it's ever been, basically. And compare that with a 2% increase in single family. So yeah, that's probably like just kind of on a steady go, but down, right? Like down from historical norms the last 20, 30 years. And then a 22% decline in condos. So condo construction, just like, who's selling this is the other thing, right? We got to look into. So now basically rentals are way outpacing the other types of housing. And
for the moment.
For the moment. And that was driven by basically this government subsidized program to create this housing. And now they've changed the criteria. So that wave of applications hit, and now the data looks good. The government takes credit for it. And then they like, what's the data going to look like for the rest of this year?
Right? It's 3 months or 6 months.
Like, is Chrystia Freeland going to come back in October and say, hey guys, housing starts are down 16% because, they're not going to take responsibility for the downturn. They're going to take credit for the upswing, right?
So do you have numbers there for housing starts overall, or
the actual numbers? So like 85,000 in the rental category, condos down to like 70,000, and single family homes like the 55,000 range, right? So
in the future predictions,
we don't have future predictions. Oh, so we have future predictions on condos in particular, because one thing you can do with condos is, because they do pre-sales, right? New condo sales, there's always like this 18-month lagging, like they start building the condo 18 months after they sell all the units, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at where we are with condo sales right now, like they've just tanked. They're the lowest they've ever been in 20 years, right? Which is like, what does that say about where we're going to be building these things in 18 months from now, right?
Yeah.
So condo starts have dropped, like I just mentioned. I'll pull that data up again. So they dropped 22% in the last month, right? Year over year. But in the next 18 months, if they follow, and they tend to follow, right? Like if you don't sell a condo, you won't build one, right? Like, so they tend to follow that line pretty close. And they lag it by a year and a half. So in a year and a half from now, like, what are we actually gonna be building, right? And you can't, this is the thing, you can't reverse that. You can't go back in time and sell condos again, right?
Nope.
So, I don't know. It'd take a pretty big subsidy from the government to get condo builders to just start building condos without selling them. I don't know. Like,
yeah. And I mean, other people have talked about this too, right? Like because what was the number? You had some numbers like up to a little further out.
Yeah. So 2023, we're at 20,000 condo completions. 2024, And we can kind of predict this a little bit because we have the sales data
Yeah.
and whatever, right? So 2024, we go up to 25,000. 2025, we're completing 40,000 units, but projecting out 26, 27, 28, we drop from 40,000 to 5,000 in 2028, right? So if you're talking about supplying housing to a growing populace, and the condos have been historically like a really popular segment for entry level homes, right? Like if somebody wants to buy a house, condos are often like the entry point, right?
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, in 5 years from now, with this crazy population growth trends that we're seeing, we're gonna have 5,000 completions. Like, what do you think? What do you think's gonna happen? I don't know. So there kind of seems to be like a little bit of an oversupply right now because people don't want to, people can't carry them, right? The cost is so high. But if they're not going to be building them, we're gonna hit some really scary times in 5 years from now.
Well, yeah, we talked about single family homes, like similar things, right? Those numbers are falling off are just like falling off a cliff, right? So single family homes dropping, condos dropping. You just talked about the rentals, purpose-built rentals. We have this uptick, and then guess what? In 6 months, there's going to be like very little because it doesn't.
And the single family
sense.
home segment.
Yep.
They're at 40-year lows in building permits right now. So we have, this is a massive slowdown in the amount of people applying for building permits, like really big, which is not something that we don't expect, right? Like, who's buying a single family home, new construction, like a detached, whatever? Like, I don't know, who can afford that?
Yeah, very few. Like people who are selling a home and buying another one.
I don't know. You seem to be pulling something up there. So.
No, I'm just looking at immigration numbers, right? And like they plan. The target for 2024 is 485,000 and then 500,000 in 2025 and 2026. So we know when we have targets of 400,000, we're bringing in 1 million, and that's not all permanent residents. But you can see with the changes to some of the plans and the economic classes, right? The idea is let's take everybody who's here and give them citizenship. I think that's what these changes are aimed at. It's not necessarily bringing more in, although that will also happen, I think. But any number that we have, we always meet. Like here's the target, and then it's been double in the last number of years. So it was over 1 million in the last 12 months, and I can't see that that trend continuing. Like it's just it's crazy. And then so we talked about all the issues with that, right? The fraud and taking advantage of people, the effect it has on employment here, but then you combine that with housing, and like there is no, essentially in 2-3 years there's going to be no new housing built, right? Like very little. So it's, if you have a growing if you have a country with more family starts happening and stuff, you need more housing. We have a housing shortage. We need more to make up for it. So what do? We're adding in more people, and then causing, by the changes to this program, right? Presumably they want to encourage more people to do affordable housing. So they're like, okay, we're going to tighten down on this, but all it does is it just makes less housing overall. Because if the numbers don't make sense, people aren't going to build them.
I love the government telling people to make things affordable. Like you must. Well, we talk about these things because supply and demand, right? Like the supply side is how many new housing units or how many housing units are there, and the demand side is obviously like how many people need to live in them. And if immigration continues to trend upwards, there's more people, there's more demand, okay, and supply continues to tighten, then what does it do to the price? It goes up, right?
Yeah.
But on the supply side, like people are converting their houses into more units. Okay, that's getting more popular. I don't know. Oh,
You pulling
man.
your hair out, Brent?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, part of the argument is that it will increasing, and this is like the grade 5 version, right? Increasing immigration will increase GDP, and therefore will increase tax revenue. Because it doesn't take a moron to figure out like we got problems. The government isn't going to have much of a choice but to increase taxes,
Yeah.
and that's on business. That'll be on personal income tax as well, right? So, okay, if you need more tax revenue, okay, bring in more people, and those people will pay taxes, and then you'll have your more revenue, right? Like, yay! Never mind that more people requires more services.
Yeah. We don't want to talk about taxes on real estate because those have gone up a lot. But
Well, yeah, and you look at them; they're floating these ideas, right? Like you're hearing about unrealized capital gains in the States. I'm
okay,
sure.
but just
we're
before we
thinking of
go into
here.
that,
Yeah.
on the supply side, you can't just build houses. You can't create houses like you can create money, right?
No.
Like these are multi-month projects in the case of condos or even like large rental buildings, right? Which are essentially the same in terms of construction. Like these are like multi-year processes, and they could be multi-year process just to get a permit
Yeah.
in Ontario in Canada, right? Because of the legislation and then all the red tape that you have to go through. So like when you want to turn the dial on immigration, like you could change a policy, you can advertise, get people to come, I guess. But on supply side, like it's way more complex. Like you need labor. You need
that's the other part.
skilled labor to do this.
Yeah.
Right?
We're not importing drywallers and plumbers and electricians.
And then you need the materials, right? And the prices on those things, like labor and materials, that like the government doesn't set. I mean, maybe they're talking about price controls, right? Like
Kamala is.
We're
next.
Yeah. But like you just can't create them, right? So if we're living in La La Land where the government thinks like they can just create value out of nothing by printing money and then spending it into the economy to create housing, like eventually it's not going to work.
Yeah, and I mean, like if you're a home builder, or I don't know, go talk to a home builder.
Yeah.
Like, what does it
What's
take
the
to build
incentive
homes?
for you to build a house if you can't sell it for the price that it costs you to build it? Like you're not right. Or if you can do it, or you can get financing to do it, but you have to lock into a rent price that makes it unfeasible for you to do it. Like, yeah,
You're also not going to do it.
no. Well, you can't do it, right?
No.
Like you
I
do
mean,
one of those, you lose your income. You do another one of those, you can't even feed your family.
And people are like, oh, it's just greedy developers. It's like, no, these are like, we've already talked about how real estate is a huge portion of the economy. That means a lot of people work in the sector. There's a lot of people building houses. There's lots of framers out there. There's lots of everybody, right?
Yeah.
Who depend on being able to build homes.
Yeah.
And like that's drying up. You talk to builders, you talk to guys in the industry. That work is drying up. So it's not just like if somebody can't build a 200-unit apartment building, right? That's not just one guy at the top who's like, sitting in his Monopoly, top hat and monocle, like,
Rubbing his
counting,
fingers together.
counting his money, cackling, right? Who are like, oh no, now I'm not going to make any money. Because that's what people, I think, generally have the impression of, like, oh, so these fat cats can't make all the money they
my
did.
impression
They
of
should
people
still build the
cackling
housing
is like,
because they're
Christopher Freeland or
because they're parasites, right? They should still do it because they have lots of money, so they should just build housing for us. What's wrong with them? It's like, no, that means they can't pay the trades
and they
who
can't
are going to
feed
come.
their families. It's like,
like the blue collar guys who are building these things. They can't afford to pay them because they need to make money. So you can pay them less. Is that what you want?
Yeah.
Okay, all you trades take a 50% pay cut.
Yeah.
That would work.
Yeah.
Like,
Now we
it's
can make
it's
housing.
not going to happen. So, just in terms of stewardship, we talk about stewardship, right? Like, we have such a rich, beautiful country, and we're just driving it into the ground with these policies. And like, why?
Yeah.
Right? And it's fake. They proclaim that woke virtues, but they don't mean it. Trudeau's a huge hypocrite. We know that. They still fly, private jets to these climate conferences and all the stuff they pretend to care about. Like they don't.
Yeah.
And every time they enact a new policy, it just makes things worse. And it's a little mind-boggling, right?
Yeah.
We should have a rich country.
I think the more we talk about this, the more complex it gets. But as a real estate investor, when you look at this, it's quite simple, right? It's you're owning a scarce asset, right? And you're owning that through leverage, right? And that leverage costs money, and that money might change up and down over the years. But if the numbers work out, like, they can't create supply as quickly as they say they can, right?
They can't create supply, period. No, it's the government. The government can create conditions.
Yeah.
Well, we've just talked through all of this, right? They can create conditions for people to be like, "Ooh, this looks good. I think I'll invest.
Yeah.
I'm going to invest my money. Like, hey, I'm going to learn how to build stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to
and then I'm going to take risks.
I'm going to struggle through
capital.
like renovating a house, doing a basement apartment, then a whole house. And then I'm going to like, maybe I'll build a duplex or a triplex with a garden suite.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that worked.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'm going to get into multifamily. I'll do a sixplex, a low rise.
Yeah.
Right. And then like in 20 years,
I'll do a subdivision.
Because every person you talk to, unless it's someone like a family business that's kind of passed down, but everybody else you talk to goes through that sort of ladder, that path, right? To eventually they get into the multifamily stuff, and now they're building it. And you don't just start out building a 200-unit building. You go through pains and struggles to get there, but the conditions have to be right in order for you to make money all the way along. And maybe, like you're going to lose money on one, and that's a valuable lesson.
Yeah.
But overall, you need to make money to keep doing that. Otherwise, you're going to do something else. You're going to go like sell pictures of your feet on the internet. Like,
we should get signatures to see if we can get our elected politicians to actually construct a house.
Man. Anyway, so I'm just yelling at you a little bit there. Like, they can't create more housing.
Yeah.
They can't.
Yeah.
And even if they had a department of building houses, it would be terrible. The houses would all be over budget and poorly built. And no. So just like
But they would have a bureaucracy to count how much over budget they were.
They would know, yeah. Or maybe they would. They like.
Okay, so
anyways,
we mentioned
it's poor
taxing
stewardship.
unrealized capital gains.
Yeah.
And price controls on food.
Well, that's being floated in the States.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's being floated there. We can't be that far off, right? Now, even Jagmeet Singh has floated this, right? In his rants against Justin Trudeau and everything else, right? Which, he's supporting that government.
Hypocritical rants.
Yeah, very hypocritical. But he's tried to make a big thing of these grocery stores and how much.
Okay, what I want to know is if Kamala Harris is floating these things, like taxing unrealized capital gains. What does she like? Does she think that's a popular idea? And who is that appealing to? Okay, so just for people who might not know what taxing unrealized capital gains, like a capital gain is when you buy something and then you sell it for a higher
price. Have an asset. The asset increases in price,
in value, and you sell it, and that gain that you make is subject to tax.
Yeah, and it's not income tax. It's not like the rate of income tax that you pay, but they're like, no, that's a separate thing.
How much capital did you gain on this asset? Let's tax it. All right.
Yeah. And it's at a lesser rate than your income.
But that's always when you sell the asset, you're taxed.
Because you don't have the money before.
No. So, you bought a house for, let's say, $100,000. You sell it in 10 years for $1 million. You get $900,000 gain on that. So now you're subject to tax on that gain.
Yeah.
Okay, that's justified because now you have the money and you can pay it.
You know what? I don't think it is. I think it's complete nonsense because it's productive stuff into the economy. You can argue with house prices specifically, like you didn't do anything to get that. So maybe there's an argument there. But like if you invest in a company, so stock market, you invest in a company, you make money, you should not be taxed on that because you're investing, the company's investing, you've paid taxes on that money that you're investing with already. The company's paying taxes. Like, where does it end? Anyways, a little mini rant.
Where does it end?
We have capital gains. We just have to accept it.
So unrealized capital gains is when they tax the increase in value of your asset without you selling it.
Yeah. So you may be living in that
How?
home.
Yeah.
It's increased in value. Let's say you're a pensioner, right?
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
Like somebody, you're retired and you live in a house and,
you look more like the pensioner. Let's say you're the pensioner.
okay, let's say I'm the pensioner and I bought a house in 1985 for like 50 grand,
Yeah.
whatever. It's now worth $800,000 and I've got it paid off. So I'm like, great,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't affect my lifestyle at
Yeah.
all because I got this house that's paid off. So I don't have a mortgage payment. That's great. But whether it's worth 100,000 or 800,000 means nothing to me unless
Yeah.
I maybe get a line of credit or one of these
Yeah.
reverse mortgages that are nonsense. But
You
like
might
in
live-
general, it
yeah.
doesn't. It doesn't
But you
mean
might
anything.
live your life in with this in the back of your head. Like, I'm going to sell this at some point, take the money and
Well, because maybe I'm 65, 70. I got some health issues. I'm going to need to move into a nursing home, and guess what? That'll take care of that. I'm not going to have to worry about it, right? But all of a sudden, boom! I get a tax bill. For
you got to pay
based on
$100,000. Well, now you're going to have to sell your asset. Yeah. So I don't know. They float these ideas and like, how absurd is that? I don't know.
Yeah, well, and that's been in Canada as well, right? We talked about that, the generation squeeze, and all this stuff. It's just, they're look like they're not even barking up the wrong tree. They're in the wrong forest. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, okay.
oh, guys.
One other thing that you mentioned was California. Dream for all. I don't know. You want to bring this up quickly? Because,
Okay, just in the spirit of ridiculous things that people are
well,
talking about.
it is called dreaming. Dreaming for all.
Yeah, they got the Dream for All something program in California. So the idea is they want to stimulate, because house prices in California are just crazy.
Yeah.
They wanted to stimulate first-time home buyers into buying homes. So they would say, we'll give you a loan of up to 20% of the value of this home, like tax-free, payment-free for whatever time. And then what we're going to do is, like, when you refinance or sell the home, so when you realize some gain on that home, we want that money back.
Yeah.
So let's say it's $200,000 on $1 million home because California. We want our $200,000 back plus 20% of the gain in value of the home. So if you bought it for $1 million, it goes up to $1.5 million. We want 20% of that $500,000 gain.
Yeah.
So like, fine. That's like, you could have a private investor. People do.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a similar thing that private investors do.
Yeah.
And you're taking a bit of a gamble that the house price is going to go up and you get your money back and that the person will actually pay you back. But of course, this is government. So, they'll backstop those losses if there are them.
I can just see the headlines in 10 years. All these programs are forgiven.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing, right? Anyway, so they filled it. The first year they ran it, they had a limited number of spots. And then like 11 days it filled up. So boom. Okay, great. But now they want to expand this to include undocumented immigrants. So you're talking about someone who came into the country illegally,
Yeah.
doesn't have status,
Yeah.
is
Woke?
no, they're probably not woke, but they're grateful to the woke policies. So if you're undocumented,
So they're pro woke.
yes, pro woke. If you're undocumented, that means you're not filing a tax return because you don't have
Documents.
like a tax number, identification number, right? You're not like so you're not paying taxes. You're undocumented. Like a whole bunch of issues.
But it
they
would
wanna
be
expand-
unfair if we didn't include these people.
This
Mark.
is the argument.
How can you say that?
We don't want to discourage.
Not only are you a greedy landlord,
That was the language. We don't want to discourage undocumented immigrants from
Owning
being the dream of home ownership. Just like, what? I don't.
what's the point of having a country?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that is the bigger question, I guess, with all of this is like, these policies are so ridiculous. What is the point? And so we've got Hervoyer from Geopolitics and Empire. Great podcast if you're into that kind of thing, like macro worldview, conspiracies.
Throw conspiracies in there, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever. There's conspiracies out there, whether you believe it or not.
Yeah, we should wrap up with this.
But like, what is the point of all of this?
Yeah, why are they?
Right? So, well, I mean, number one, from a stewardship perspective, we're doing a terrible job in Canada. But if you're a real estate investor, there's opportunity undeniably, because just look at supply and demand. It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be very, very little supply and lots and lots and lots of demand. So, you do the math, right?
Yeah.
It's expensive, but it is what it is. But like, what is the point of all this? So there, we'll talk about this for Voye, but one stream of thought is that unrest and unwise policies and everything is being encouraged as part of like sort of this sort of a new age type of idea, which has been around for a long time and never has gone away. And like, you look at the WEF, right? Some people will say, no, they want statelessness. They want a one world empire. So that's one theory, and that would make sense, right? More government control, et cetera, et cetera. The other theory is like, no, let's just let everything kind of collapse, and then we can remake the world into, how we want it, and something that's more friendly to the earth. Because if there's more war and there's more unrest, then people die. Depopulation is what we need. And like, people are not shy about saying this, right? That we need depopulation. This is not like, this is not some shadowy conspiracy, right? Any environmentalist will tell you we need less people on this earth. So don't have children. And so, of course, if you're a Christian, whether you believe the conspiracies and this conspiracy or that school of thought, like when someone's telling you have no children, don't interfere with the earth, like it's directly contrary to the commands that we have received.
Christian worldview.
Yeah, in a Christian worldview. So like, it's nonsense. So
yeah, what is C.R. Wiley says, we had him on last time, is when people believe in the future, they tend to fill it with little copies of themselves. So children are a vote of confidence. And that's true, right? As Christians, we do have confidence in the future, and we can.
Yeah.
And that's why we talk about households, family, these sorts of topics in relation to stewardship, right? God's given you the also the command of subduing the earth, right? And that is a vote of confidence. Like, God is in control of these things, and I'm going to have kids to continue to glorify Him in the future. Yeah. And that's something that I wonder, are these politicians and people in powerful positions, how many of them have kids?
Well, yeah, that's
are they
the
doing
question,
this
right?
for themselves and for their own power and legacy while they live, or and they don't care what happens after they die, or like do they care about future generations? Because they say they do it for future generations, right? Like Trudeau is often talking about, well, you'd say both things, I guess. They say, like, we don't want house prices to fall because we don't want the people who've kind of banked on it for their pensions to be at a loss. But we want house prices to fall because then kids can afford it, and it's good for the next generation.
Yeah.
But I don't know. They like, I guess you can tell, like, if they have kids, it's a vote of confidence in the future. People aren't having 13 kids anymore, they're having 2. So
let's get busy out there, people.
Their confidence has been cut by a factor of 6.
So I mean, if you have a household, that's your little shelter from the storm, right? And maybe that's not like, we always talk about,
is a spiritual storm, right? Like,
well, I mean, you can argue that there's an economic storm out there as well, right? But we definitely a spiritual.
On this show, though we don't argue.
We should. I think we should more. No, but you want that little oasis, sort of in the storm, right? That whatever's happening, like, you're good. And we always talk about but we talk about like family, children, and like, I realize that's not the situation for everybody, but like, maybe you can live with some like-minded people and have, it's a different kind of household. But I mean, this is so common anyways.
What you're describing is almost like the building block of a country that has a culture that all align. Like, maybe you should live in a place where people actually share the values that you have.
Interesting, and support each other, and build communities and neighborhoods, and then up from there. Yeah, maybe that's an interesting idea.
Should we leave it at that?
I think so. That's enough for today.
I'm halfway done my coffee. So
there you go. Okay, well, thank you for listening again to us, folks. Hopefully you got some useful updates out of that and information. And until next time,
steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
and if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.